first step is to make sure that our variables are lined up. So in this next example, we can see that our x's are lined up and our y's, our equal signs, and our constants. So that's fine. If they're in standard form, we are in good shape. It's the second step, though, that we're going to have to alter. So we're wanting our coefficients to be opposite numbers. Well, I see for my x's, I have a -6 and a -2. Well, they're not opposites. And I have a +5 and a -4. They're not opposites either. So we're going to have to alter one of the equations. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make my x on the second equation a +6x. That makes it the opposite, which is what we want. In order to make it a +6x, I need to multiply that by a -3 because -2 times -3 is +6, and so then my x's will be opposites from each other. I can't just multiply it to x, so as I've already showed you, I'm going to multiply the entire equation to make it so. So this is how I do it to make sure it's all organized. I'm going to bring over the first equation, so it's -6x plus 5y equals 25. And now I'm going to multiply and distribute this -3 to all of my numbers. So -2x times -3 is a +6x, which is what we wanted. That's the whole purpose of this. A -4y times -3 is a +12y. And then we have a 14 times a -3, and that is a -42. Okay, so we just have to multiply the entire equation to make it so that those coefficients are opposites. And we did. So step 2 might encase a little extra to get it there. So now that they're the opposites and our equations are all lined up, we are now able to go into step 3 where we solve and add our equations together. So a -6x plus 6x is 0. So those cancel out, which is what we wanted. 5y plus 12y is 17y equals a -42 plus 25 is a -17. Now all I do is divide by a +17 to get y alone. I end up getting y equals a -1. So now we're back to our normal, okay? So I have that my answer, x comma y. I found that my y answer already is -1. Now we have to worry about what to do next. So the next last step is, our step 4, is to substitute in this answer into one of the equations to find out what x is. Well, I'm just going to plug it into the first equation. You can plug it into any equation. But I have -6x plus 5y equals 25. Now I'm going to put our substitution in. So -6x plus 5, and instead of y, we have a -1. So 5 times -1 equals 25. And now we just solve it. So -6x, and then it says 5 times a -1. Well, that's a -5 equals 25. Now we just get our x alone. So I add 5 to the other side. I end up getting a -6x equals 30. You divide both sides by -6 to cancel it out. And when we get x by ourselves, it's going to be a -5. So that is going to finish up our answer. So that is going to be what we get for our total answer. So there's a lot of equations that we have to do, but you guys are fully capable of it. So this next example is very similar to this previous one, where our coefficients are not opposites. Yes, our equations line up, but they're not opposites. What I'm going to do is specifically look at my y's. I have a -4 and a +3. So I'm looking at the least common multiple that I can multiply them by to have a positive and a negative version. So to be honest, the easiest would be to just multiply them by each other. So if I multiply the whole first equation by a 3 and the second equation by a 4, we're going to have a -12y and a +12y, which is what we want. Go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and multiply both of these equations to make sure that you wrote them correctly when you distributed the 3 and the 4 to both of them. All right, so you guys should have had a 9x minus 12y equals 99 and a 16x plus 12y equals 76. So you just had to multiply those numbers out. The reason we did that was so that our y's had the opposite coefficients. That's the purpose of this. Once we have that down, we get to add the equations to cancel them out. So 16x plus 9x is 25x. Negative 12 plus positive 12 is gone. It's 0. So we're done with our y's, equals 99 plus 76, which is 175. Now we just solve for x by dividing by 25 on both sides. We end up getting x equals 7. So in our handy dandy little answer coordinates, we know that our 7 value, or our x value is 7. The very last thing that we need to do is plug in 7 for x on either one of our equations. I'm going to do it in this first one. So we have 3x minus 4y equals 33. And now I'm going to substitute that 7 in. So it's 3 times 7 minus 4y equals 33. 21 minus 4y equals 33. Now I'm going to subtract 21 to both sides. I'm left with a negative 4y equals 12. I divide both sides by negative 4, and we get y equals a negative 3 for our answer. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in my coordinate, and this would be the point where those two lines cross on a graph. Go ahead and try these next two together. I'll give you a big hint. For this first one, you don't even need to multiply the equations by anything because we have our x's as opposites. For the second one, however, we have 4s for our y coefficients, but we need one to be opposite, which means negative. So what I would recommend doing is multiplying one of the equations by -1 to change it. I'll do it for the first one to get you guys started. So if we multiply by -1, we change it to negative 3x minus 4y equals a positive 6. And then I'm going to bring over the second equation so that it's all lined up for you. So now really all you have to do are add the equations and solve for x and y to find out your answers. Pause the videos and see if your answers are correct. All right, so here are the answers and all the work that you should have. Let me explain a little bit. So for the first equation, you just had to add them down so that x is canceled out. And in orange, it shows that you should have gotten 3y equals 12, then y equaled 4. So I put that in my answer. Then in purple, I showed you the next step, that's last step. You substitute in what you got for one of the equations. So I put a star that I put in the second equation. If you plugged in 4 for y in the first equation, you should still have the same answer of -1 for x. I showed all my work off to the side. The same thing for the second problem. In orange, I showed you I added those new equations we made. I got 4x equals -8, and then I found that x equaled -2, and I put it in my answer key down the bottom. And then in purple again, I showed, hey, I'm going to plug in x in the first equation. Again, you could have done it in the second. And I got the answer of y equals 0, which is completely fine. So I put in my answer, and there you go. Go ahead and try these last two problems on your own. If you want to, you will have to multiply both equations, or both different problems, to get opposite coefficients. You can choose what to do, and you should have the same answer as me no matter what you do if you do your mathematics correctly. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can do it all on your own, then come back and see what my answers were. I will also make sure to show my work, so if you're confused, you can look back and I'll try to explain it. All right, so here's what I did to solve. Hopefully your answers are correct. So I decided in the first equation to go ahead and multiply the top equation by -2. That created my coefficients of x to be opposite, a -6 and +6. You could have also multiplied the top equation by a -3 so that your y coefficients were opposite. Either way you did it, you should have gotten y equals 2 or x equals 3. So I was able to show you all my work. I found my y equals 2 first, then I plugged it in purple into that first equation, got x equals 3, and I wrote it as a coordinate. The second one, I decided to multiply the bottom equation by 4 because then my x's would have been a positive and a negative 4. So you make sure you multiply all of the numbers by that 4, not just x. When I did that, I canceled out my x's and I got y equals -1. I plugged that into the first equation. You could plug it into the second, it's fine, but you should have x equals -6 as your answer.